Aloha. Since I'm not going to be here as I was in 2017 to go over the details of caring for the birds, I'm making a hopefully hit Hollywood movie to share with you, to go through the details of it, something that you can watch at your leisure and review if you need to. So in the morning, this time of year, the birds wake up around daybreak, and by 6:30 they're going to start to be hungry. So I'd appreciate it if you could take care of their breakfast no later than 7 o'clock. When I'm home, they are complaining very vocally if they don't see me on the job by about 6:45. So you'll be approaching the office in the morning. Of course, it's midday when we're doing this educational film, so that there's adequate lighting. But when you open the door, the office will already be adequately lit by 6:30 or 7 o'clock in the morning. But if it's an unusually dark day for some reason, there's a light switch here. You would just push light, and that will activate the ceiling light. When you're done with it, push it again to turn it off. So the next step here will be to look at some elements in the office that have to do with maintaining a comfortable environment for these birds. The bird's native habitat is in Namibia, which is in West Africa, and it's about as far south of the equator as Hawaii is north of the equator. For that reason, the birds are comfortable in this environment, but they don't do well with extreme heat or extreme cold. So when the temperature gets down to the 60s, which it might be during the night while you're here, you may be running a floor heater during the night. Here's the heater. And if you need to run it, you would just turn it on to setting 1. And it will produce heat until the room reaches a reasonable temperature, probably around 70 degrees, and then it will shut itself off. If you find it running during the daytime when it's warm, please just turn it off. So the next thing I'd like to point out is an air filter in the corner here. The birds produce a lot of dander from their feathers, and that can be unhealthy if they're in a confined space with a lot of dander contaminating the air that they're breathing. So we have an air filter which should run during the day. To start it, you would press the power button twice, and that puts it on the setting that will effectively recirculate air. And then to turn it off in the evening, you need to push it twice again. So for now, let's leave it running. In the morning, if it's not too cold, you can open up this slider to let some fresh air in. And in the evening, this must be closed. If around midday the office starts to feel warm, let me show you this switch here again, if I may. The same switch where the light is has different speeds for running the ceiling fan. 2 is the speed that I would recommend if you need to run that fan. You probably would not need to start that until 11 or 12 o'clock, midday. And if you are running it, please be sure to turn it off in the evening. I think it's unlikely that you'll need the air conditioner, but if it's the middle of the day and the fan is running and it's still hot in the office, uncomfortably hot, here's a remote control that runs the air conditioner. And to run the air conditioner, you just point this remote and push the button once. This button. That should maintain the temperature in the office no hotter than 85, which is still comfortable for the birds. In the evening, if the air conditioner is running, please be sure to turn it off. Also, turn off the ceiling fan. And if you have to run the air conditioner, make sure that the slider is closed. So, when you're ready to start the breakfast procedure, I usually say something to the bird before I uncover it, so it's not just startled and surprised by the cover of the cage starting to move. This bird's name is Trace, like unos, dos, tres. This was the third lovebird that we got, and it had escaped from an aviary probably nearby, did not know how to forage, and it walked up to Bev when she was potting flowers outdoors and it was starving. So the bird still has a great deal of sensitivity about food shortage, and it's really important that it always sees that it has more than it can eat. So I go, "Good morning, Trace." Uncover the cage. And being kind of an obsessive-compulsive character, I fold the cover in a way that makes it easy for me to unfold it later during the day, but you could just toss it over this carrying cage if that's easier for you. This small cage here is used in the unlikely event of an emergency. I'll get to that later, but if something unforeseen happens and you have to take a bird to the veterinarian, you'll need to catch it and put it in the cage here so you can transport it. So you got Trace's cage uncovered, and then you're going to remove the used water and seeds. So on this side of the cage there are doors, and these doors are a little bit difficult to operate. You have to push this handle back, open the door, and remove that dish. And then be sure you close the door again, or the bird will find its way through that opening. Same thing with the seeds. And I just pour the used water into this container and dump the seeds in the trash. Next we have Tinkerbell. Tinkerbell is the only one of the three birds who was really born and raised as a pet. She was hatched in Hana. We got her when she was 7 weeks old, and she's extremely affectionate and well socialized compared to the other two birds who were really wild birds at the time they found us. Tinkerbell's food and water doors work a little bit differently. Instead of that push latch, they have a disc that has to be just rotated out of the way so that you can open that door. Again, I'm just going to toss these seeds in the trash and pour the used water into this blue cup. And the bird on the left here is Danae. It's kind of an in-joke. Danae is a Tibetan word that means so, which is something a person would say if he had been interrupted and then was continuing a discussion or a lecture. And so, I won't go into all the details about how she got that name, but it indicates that something is about to happen, but we don't exactly know what. Danae is extremely intelligent. So we'll remove her used food and water. The same as with Trace's cage. Now, while we're on the subject of not opening the cage door and making sure that the food and water doors are closed when you're done with them, in the unlikely event that a bird does get out of the cage, let's review the emergency procedure for containing it. So, the first thing to do is to close the door to the office so that the space in which that bird has escaped is confined. The next thing to do would be to turn the fan off if the fan is running. The bird's feathers are trimmed so that it's not likely that they can gain enough altitude to get into the fan, but if they're startled, it's possible. So wherever the bird is, offer this dowel. Tinkerbell. Here we go. All right, so Tinkerbell is not as familiar with the dowel as the other birds are, and they will usually get on it, step on it right away if they're loose. Tinkerbell, you could probably offer your finger and she'll hop on it. And then just return the bird to the cage. Good bird. Now, although I did open a cage in order to demonstrate how to retrieve an escaped bird, unless a bird has escaped and you need to replace it in the cage, please never, that is to say never, open the cage door. Hopefully you won't be facing that situation. The dowel is kept over here next to where the tray is for the food. So, having removed all the used food and water, we're going to the next evolution, as they say in marine training, going into the kitchen to prepare breakfast. Here's a light that's useful to turn on. And a couple of more lights in the corner here. The one on the far right and the one on the far left. These two I would leave alone. This is a garbage disposal and this is a light exterior to the kitchen. So what I would do at this point, you may come up with your own method that you prefer. I'll just show you how I do it. I dump that old water out and I rinse it 3 times. And then use this reverse osmosis water. You probably only need about a quarter to a third of the depth of this for what you're going to need to fill the bird's drinking dishes. If there are any seeds spilled on the tray, please remove them because they attract geckos, and geckos are capable of harboring some diseases that can be dangerous to birds. The next step would be to wash these dishes. And for that, you're going to need this plastic container. And please make sure that you keep this white one distinct from this blue one, because the white one is going to have soap detergent residue in it, and the blue one is for the birds drinking water. So I just put one big drop of dish detergent in this container. If I use more than that, my supervisor, Bev, will complain because we have a septic system and dish detergent is not good for it. Then you can just use this right-sided tap to make some soapy water. Be careful because this is almost scalding temperature, this water. Once you've filled this container, it's a good idea to empty it pretty quickly or it may become difficult to hold on to it. So I just pour some hot water into all these dishes, hopefully kind of sterilize them. And then if you put cold water in each one of them for a good 3 seconds, you should be able to put your fingers into it afterwards without getting burned. I'm just showing you how I clean these. You want to rinse them enough to get all the soap out. I make 2 little stacks of 3 dishes for a reason that I'll explain in a minute. These 3 dishes you don't need to dry because they're going to have water in them anyway. The dishes that have been cleaned from the previous day you can prepare as I'm going to demonstrate. Um, 2 of these dishes have a stainless steel cup around them and the third doesn't. That's because the cages on the end for Trace and for Danae have a different kind of receptacle for dishes than the cage that has Tinkerbell. Now you'll need to get into the refrigerator. And there's a couple of things that you'll need each morning. This bag of pellets and this bag of sun-made fruit bits. The ideal diet for these birds is difficult to maintain except in the wild where they can forage freely. But there's a company that makes a very high potency nutrient in the form of pellets. And so we use that for Tinkerbell and Danae, and it's a heaping teaspoon for each of them. Trace does not eat pellets, and it's a shame because she's habituated to a seed diet which is not as nutritious, but because of her history of having nearly starved, I'm not willing to put her through a stressful transition and force her to change the diet that she prefers. Trace is going to eat seeds and not pellets, and so I'm going to leave this dish over here empty for the moment. All the birds are going to have some dried fruit every day, and they don't use much of it, so no need to put more than maybe 3 or 4 pieces of fruit in each dish or they'll waste it. And then I just try to squeeze the air out of these bags to keep things fresher. I put these back in the refrigerator. Now for the bird's water, there's going to be something a little different here. I'm going to use this dish for Trace's water, and I want you to pay attention to the water level. It's very low. It's certainly enough for her to be able to dunk down and drink whenever she wants. But I don't give her as much water as the other birds because she had the habit of dunking her head in her water and ended up getting an ear infection that required us to force feed her antibiotics for almost 3 weeks. Fortunately, she recovered completely, but I want to keep the water level low enough that she can drink out of it, but she can't put her head underneath the surface. I'm not really filling either of these dishes with water, because if it's any more full than what I've illustrated here, you have to tilt it to get it into the holder in the cage and it will spill. Well, I think breakfast is served. So Trace's seeds, we're going to give her 3 heaping teaspoons full. And although she's not going to anywhere near finish this, by 3 o'clock in the afternoon she's going to want you to refill it with another couple of teaspoons full, because she's such a picky eater that there's only 1 or 2 types of seeds that she'll eat. So, it's important that each dish go in the right dish container, because the birds, like me, are creatures of habit and they become habituated to finding things in a certain place, and they don't like it if they don't show up where they expect. So the dried fruit goes on the right. The seeds go on the left front. And the water on the left rear. For Tinkerbell, because she has a different kind of food holder in her cage, there aren't going to be those metal stainless steel containers. So the water goes on the left rear. And the pellets on the left front. And the dried fruit on the right rear. And then for Danae, the fruit. pellets. Now, in the mid-afternoon, Trace is going to want 2 more teaspoons of seeds. So you would just remove the seed dish, add the 2 teaspoons, and replace the dish. And the dried fruit needs to be removed from all the birds' cages by mid-afternoon, by 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. 2 reasons for that. One is it attracts ants if it's left longer. And another is that in the heat and humidity of this part of the world, it is possible for it to spoil and become unwholesome for them to consume. So you would remove all 3 birds' fruit containers. In 2 cases, those will include stainless steel cups, and in the case of Tinkerbell, in the middle cage, it won't. And then just wash those dishes and leave them in the corner of the kitchen where you found them this morning when we were first preparing breakfast. In the evening, you'll want to turn off the air purifier, the air conditioner if it's running. If the air conditioner is not running, the glass slider here will have been opened and you'll want to slide that closed. Turn off the fan, and then cover the birds' cages with the bird covers, the same way that you found them in the morning, and close the door to the office. After that, which needs to happen around 7 o'clock in the evening, I'd appreciate it if you could take care not to speak loudly or make loud noise outside the office. The birds supposedly need 12 hours of uninterrupted sleep to maintain their health. Now, in terms of supplies, I'm going to leave this seed dish full, and I don't think you will run out of it during the time you're here. But if you did run out of it, there is an extra supply underneath the desk in this cardboard carton that's labeled Finch. And I don't think that you'll run out of pellets or dried fruit either, but if you do, there'll be a supply of both of those here under the desk. Our groundskeeper, Derek, who you met in 2017, he's very familiar with taking care of these birds and always graciously volunteers to do it whenever we need to be off island. So, of course, he'll be taking care of them for the few days that we're gone before you arrive. I expect the plan will be that he'll pick you up at the airport and provide you with the house keys. And then a couple of times during the day, he's going to come and play with Tinkerbell. The other 2 birds are not socialized enough that they really need human contact, and they really relate more to each other than they do to me. But Tinkerbell is not terribly interested in those birds, and she does need human contact. So Derek will come, take Tinkerbell into the living room. There are toys there that she likes to play with, and he'll spend some time entertaining her a couple of times a day. Now, I'm going to take a look at my notes for the script for this production and see what I've left out. Every other day, I would appreciate it if you would change the paper towel in these cages. And the way to do that is just pull out this drawer, remove and discard the used towel, and then there'll be a roll of paper towel here that you can use to recover the floor of the cages. Also, the birds don't have very good table manners, and there may be seeds, pellets, or fruit bits scattered on the floor underneath the cages. And those need to be vacuumed every couple of days. You can use this lightweight handheld vacuum. You just push this forward and vacuum anything that you see that needs to be cleaned up underneath the cages. Every other day after you replace the paper towel. Now, hopefully there will not be the need for veterinarian services, but I will provide you and Derek both with the contact information for our vet. There's only one avian veterinarian on the island. He usually works in Kihei, which is about an hour's drive from here. But he also has an office in Kahului, which is more like a half an hour. In the unlikely event of an emergency, there's a 24-hour contact number, and they'll call him in if necessary. You would just need to put the bird in the carrying cage, which I illustrated, and drive carefully to whichever clinic you're directed for the veterinarian to have a look at her. If there's any confusion or difficulty or concern, you'll have my contact numbers, including my cell phone number and the number of the hotel where I'm staying. I would appreciate it if you would call me at any hour of any day if there's any issue or concern whatsoever. In closing, I'm really appreciative that you're willing to perform these duties so that we have the chance to get away for a while without worrying about the welfare of these creatures. Thank you, and aloha.